buy rental properties using very little cash with MAPS coach Heidi Fore. Please note this meeting is being recorded and will be available within 24 hours on the MAPS Fast Track YouTube channel. Currently, everyone's on mute. However, if you have any questions for Heidi, please type them into the chat box. Following the meeting, if you have any questions about today's call or our other coaching programs, please email us at fasttrack@kw.com. And that's all for me. Heidi, take it away.
Thank you, Rodrigo. Hi, everyone. I am so glad to see some familiar faces. Thanks for coming back for another one of our great sessions on buying rental properties. If you've been in one of the other sessions that I teach, you know that they all connect with each other and they're all part of the plan of financial freedom, to get you to financial freedom, which is where the way I describe it is having your investments give you enough passive income that you're working because you want to and not because you have to. I've segmented it down into about 14 different steps that it takes to get from where you are to financial freedom. And one of those steps is buying the properties, is figuring out how you're going to pay for them. Now, if you have unlimited amounts of cash, like, I don't know, maybe your last name is Hilton or something, like, you could just pay cash for all the properties. Fantastic. That's good for you. You can go ahead and log off. But if you are wondering how you can pay for rental properties without paying all cash on every deal, stick around the next 30 minutes. You're going to learn some really good things. So that's what this session is on. It's buying properties with a small amount of your cash in it. I am Heidi Fore, and I have the pleasure of being a MAPS coach and a Keller Williams realtor. And I have been a realtor since 2002. I've seen markets that were really good for investors, markets that are tougher for investors, markets that are good for renters, markets that are good for traditional buyers or traditional sellers. The point is, it's always a good market for somebody. And if you have the right tools, you as an investor can always find rental properties that make sense for you to buy that you can still get good cash flow on. That brings me to another point I wanted to tell you about today is there's another class happening on March 1st on how to find properties with good cash flow. Yes, even in this market. I'm going to give you all my tips on where to look for them and how to know if they could be a good investment by determining some criteria. So I have bought all of my investment properties since 2018, the ones that I own now. I bought a few of them before that, and I've replace them with better performing units. And when I say units, a unit means a home, but if I have a fourplex, that's 4 units in one property. If I have just a house, it's 1 property in 1 unit. So that's what that means. Most of my 59 rental units are single family homes, just a house. Some are duplexes, which means there's 2 units in 1 building, or fourplexes or 3plexes, 1 5plex. But I bought them all since 2018 when people have been saying, I'm not buying in this market. You can't find any deals in this market. There's no inventory out there. I'm telling you, there is. You just have to know where to find it and the best ways to pay for it. So what we're going to talk about today are 9 of those ways to pay for it. There are 20 that I always have in my tool belt at all times, and we can get into all 20 in my longer sessions of this, but today on our 30 minutes we're just going to talk about 9. Now, before you take action on anything that I say in this class or any other class, please make sure that you talk to an attorney to protect your assets and that you're following the right laws. Talk to an accountant to make sure you're not putting yourself in a bad place financially. Talk to a financial planner for the same reason. Talk to a realtor if you're not a realtor before you take action on buying rental properties. Also, if you're going to do seller financing or the BRRRR method or moving things into LLCs, just read your mortgage terms, read your note, especially regarding the due on sale clauses and prepayment penalties, and decide if you'll need to get permission from banks before you take action on any of the ideas and topics that I talk about in my classes. Okay, now that that's out of the way, like I said earlier, there are 20 different ways to pay for rental properties using very little cash or using all your cash. That's one of the ways, right? But let's talk about 9 of the ways that you can do this and to really keep the ball going. Keep the ball rolling as you're finding properties. We want to make sure you always have a method to pay for them. I like to stretch my cash to buy as many properties as possible, because that's just the method that I use. I understand that there are some people that are more conservative and they just want to save up money until they can buy a property and then save up more money and buy another property with all cash. Cool. I will not judge you for your methods. All of the methods that I'm going to talk about today have pros and cons to them, and not all of them will work in every situation. However, there are some situations where each of these would work. These are just tools that you can use as needed, tools to use when it solves a problem for someone, and when it solves and when it's a way for you to get a property and it's a way for a seller to sell the property. And as a little note here, little star next to it, just because you can use these methods doesn't mean you should. As I said earlier, there are pros and cons to each of the methods that we'll discuss today. If you have questions about these, because we're skimming the surface on a lot of them, because we only have 30 minutes, go ahead and put your message in the chat. And if I don't have time to respond to it today on this call, I will send you an email, I promise, today or tomorrow, responding to your question. So here's the easiest way to buy a rental property, and that is to buy a property as a primary residence, and then either like rent out, like if you buy it as a fourplex as a primary residence, or a threeplex or a twoplex, you rent out the other apartments, or buy a single family home and you can always rent out some of the rooms. So if that's where you are in life and this is an option for you in this area where you are, you're able to do that, this is the easiest way to buy a rental property. Another thing that you can do is just buy a house. If you just want to buy a house, hold on to it for a couple of years, live in it for 2 or 3 years, then keep it as a rental property and go buy another that's a primary residence and keep doing that. That's a great way to get a rental property every 2 or 3 years. Some people don't know this, but you can get a house, a condo, a duplex, a triplex, or a fourplex as a primary residence with a regular loan with as little as like 3% down, sometimes 3.5% down or 5% down. But it's a very easy way to get into a house with little money, and you can ask the seller to pay for your closing costs so that you can do pay cash for any repairs needed. I like to buy houses that need a lot of improving. My kids call it buying dumpy houses. They say, why do you always buy dumpy houses? I say, because you make money on the dumpy houses, and they get to learn to do the repairs. They're in 6th and 8th grade, so they're not going to be happy with me no matter what I do. So we buy houses that need improving and we live in them for 2 or 3 years. Then we go buy another house and keep the old one as a rental property. Yeah, as a rule of thumb, it's a really great idea to try to get the house for 70% of what it will be worth after it's repaired, after you fix it up. And after it's renovated, but before you move out, look at getting a home equity loan or a home equity line of credit on that primary residence after you've got some good equity in it, because you can use that money as a down payment on a rental property. Then you'd have 2 rental properties after you buy your next primary residence. You'd have the one that you used to live in, and then you were able to use that line of credit or home equity loan from the one you used to live in as a down payment on another rental property. Over 15 years using this method, you could have 5 to 7 properties just from moving primary residences, and another 5 properties from using home equity loans as down payments. This is a really quick way to keep buying properties with very little of your own cash as down payments. So we just talked about the home equity line of credit. Usually, as I told you, there's pros and cons. A con is it's usually a variable interest rate. And as you know, the interest rates lately have been up and down. So that's the only con to this, is a lot of times your interest rate goes up and down. But the good part about this is as the balance is paid off, you can reuse that money like a credit card. Like if you have a credit card and you pay down the balance, you can reuse that money. The home equity line of credit works the same way. And you only pay interest on the amount that's used. It's really easy to get for a primary residence. And a lot of primary residences, you can leverage up to 95% of the value. Again, not that you should, just that you can, just know that you can. I don't recommend ever having that much debt against a primary residence because home prices can go up and down. You always want to be able to have equity in your home. Home equity line of credits on rentals are harder to find and qualify for. A lot of times you can leverage up to 80% on those. And That's why I said before you move out of your primary residence, while it's still a primary residence, look at getting a home equity line of credit at that time. You can get a fixed rate home equity loan that on your primary residence or on a rental property. They're usually fixed for like 10 to 30 years, and you pay those back in equal installments over a certain amount of time. That's the difference between a home equity line of credit and a home equity loan. Once the balance is paid back, you cannot reuse it like you can the line of credit. The other thing about these is usually you get all of the money up front as cash, and so you start paying interest on all that money, even if you haven't found another property to buy yet, even if you're like not using it. So that's another difference between this and the line of credit. For rental properties, the best that I've seen on these is only they fix these for 10 years, and it's a maximum 80% of the value of the property. But for certain situations, this can be a really good option because you can use that as a down payment to buy a package of houses from a retiring landlord, or just buy one more house. Number 4 is having an equity partner. An equity partner means that like you find a property and you put in the time and you manage all the repairs and you find the tenants and you're the property manager, but it's not your money that's in it. Either you and somebody else are going in on it together with both of you put money in it, or maybe they're just putting in the money and you're putting in the time and you both own the house. Sometimes the partner can bring all the cash to purchase it. Sometimes they'll want you to put in a little bit of your own cash. And they'll also need to put in for repairs, or you're going to have an agreement on who's going to pay for repairs. And you're going to have the deed in both of your names, or you're both going to own an LLC and the LLC is going to own the property. This is where you need to talk with an attorney. You can own it as tenants in common. You can split the rent 50-50. You can come up with any agreements you want. And then someday you can refinance the property in your name only and pay back the equity partner plus, whatever half of the increased value is, if that's your agreement. There needs to be an agreement going forward of what if somebody wants out? What if you or the equity partner wants out? What if you have more than one equity partner? What happens if one of the partners wants to sell it, the other ones don't? Should we buy that person out based on appraised values? So these are all things to consider that we don't have time to go into today because we've got lots of other things to talk about. You could get a debt partner only, where the partner that's bringing the money doesn't actually own the house. You own the house, you're just using their money. This is where you ask someone to borrow money to buy the property and you offer to pay them back in fixed payments over an agreed period. You negotiate a win-win with them. Sometimes it could be just interest on the money. Sometimes it's principal plus interest each month. And you need to negotiate how often you pay them and for how long you pay them. Some people don't want to tie up their money for 30 years, but they'll lend you money for like 2 or 3 years until you can refinance it with a traditional bank or a traditional mortgage. This can be a good option once you've used up all of your regular loans. So if you're going through a bank or a mortgage lender, most of them have their own rules about how many rental properties they'd like borrowers to have. One of the banks that I work with says they don't want someone to have more than 6. Another one says they'll let you have 10. 10 traditional fixed 30-year mortgages in your personal name is the limit for a lot of banks. So after that, either you stop buying properties or you got to find another way to pay for them. And so one of them would be having a debt partner. It's called private lending, when you borrow money from someone and then you pay them back. People who have a self-directed IRA, their IRA can lend you money, and that can be a way for you to get some private lending. In this situation, this is different than the equity partner because after the debt is paid, you don't owe them anything else, and you can get as much rent as you want and profit as you want. And when you sell the house, make as much profit as you want, and you don't owe that person anything. Your agreement with them was only for the time that you owed them money. And once you paid them back their money, they're out of that house, that property. You might have heard of the term hard money lender. It's another way to get money to buy a house. Hard money lenders are companies. They mostly work with flippers, people that want to buy a house and sell it quickly. They have really high interest rates, but they'll loan a high amount of what's it called? the amount of debt versus the loan to value. They do a higher loan to value than other banks. Even up to 100%, it could be possible. They're looking at the deal. Like, is this going to be a good deal for them? More than they're looking at the borrower. So they also can be a great place to go if you're not able to get qualified with a traditional lender. They have a really easy underwriting process and they close really quickly. They can close in like a week or two. And the downside to this is usually a really high interest rate, like 11 or 12%. And they also make you refinance it, or like they want to get their money back within 1 to 3 years. They want to get paid off either from you selling it or refinancing it in 1 to 3 years. That's how most of them do it. If the deal isn't a good enough deal for them, they might not do the 100% financing. You might have to borrow the money, borrow the down payment from someone, and then use the hard money for the rest. Number 7 is a master lease option with the right to sublet. These are not done too regularly because a lot of investors don't like the idea of not being the ones that choose the tenants that are living in their properties. And as I said earlier, I'm just giving you all the tools out there. Just because you can do it doesn't mean you should, and it doesn't work for every situation. But there might be a situation where you ask the landlord or home seller if they would rent the house to you at a certain rent amount, fixed rent amount, and allow you to sublet it either as a short-term rental or a traditional rental agreement long-term, and you do the managing. Sometimes people call this Airbnb rental arbitrage. And this is where you keep the difference between what you're able to rent it for and what you owe the landlord for on your lease. And you take over maintenance and management of the unit. Also, I would, make sure that you have in writing that you have an agreement to purchase it at the end of the lease for a predetermined price. It gives you find a time a partner to help you purchase it at the end of the lease. Of course, you're going to want to pay a security deposit and option money up front, which you get back when you purchase it. So consider this, if it's able to be done in your area, as one way that you could get your foot in the door, start managing and taking care of and improving a rental property without much of your money in it. Number 8 is seller financing. This is easiest if the seller has no mortgage on it. It's a little trickier if the seller already has a mortgage on it, which is why I said earlier that the seller needs to check with their bank about any kind of due on sale clause or any penalties that the seller might incur that might end up being a problem for both of you in a situation. Some banks are fine with it. Sometimes if the seller has an existing mortgage, then your agreement with them is called a wrap mortgage. Some investors call it a subject to mortgage or a subject to purchase. These are all like names that people call seller financing when there's another mortgage involved. So you pay the seller's current mortgage plus a little extra to the seller every month in a lot of these scenarios. And you rent out the house to a tenant and you keep the difference. So the seller's making a little money, you're making a little money. It's a way for you to go ahead and buy the properties now if you don't have enough cash for a down payment. This is a good tool to use. Like if the seller doesn't want to spend any more time on that property anymore, maybe the seller has a lot of other properties, maybe the seller has a full-time job and just doesn't want to be a landlord anymore, but they really like the idea of receiving monthly payments and passive income. So this is a win-win. And just like any purchase, when you're buying a rental property, you always want it to be a win-win. A win for you, a win for the seller, a win for the tenants that are in there, a win for everybody. So seller financing can make sense in those situations. Number 9, after you are able to purchase a house with cash, use the BRRRR method for the next one. This is also known as a cash out refinance, but just doesn't sound as fun. This is where you buy a house with all cash, you rehab it, or you could say repair it, or you could say remodel it, you could say renovate it, whatever you want your second R to be. And then you rent it to the tenants. So BRRRR, buy, renovate, rent. The next one is refinance. Refinance it at a local bank with a cash out refi loan. And then you repeat, you recycle the money. So on that third R, the refinance R, you might have to talk to 20 banks locally till you find one, and nationally, till you find one that has the terms that you want. So that when I do this, when I've done this in the past, I've bought a lot of properties this way. I've called through the banks and I have found that the local banks have better products in place for this. Sometimes I can get a good deal with a national lender, but sometimes the national lenders stop doing this product, then they'll restart it. So the point is, if the first bank tells you no, call 20 more. And you want to ask them, tell me about your cash out refinance products on rental properties, and tell them that you would like a 30-year fixed rate term at 75% loan to value based on the appraised value. And you would like it if it doesn't matter how long ago you bought it. That is the best. Those are the best terms, because it really, it sets you up for success and enables you to keep buying more, and just keep reusing your cash over and over again. So at the closing of the refinance, at the refinance closing, you'll get a check, and you can use that check to go into your bank account and use that to go pay cash for another one. And then you do the same thing. You buy another one, you fix it up, you get it rented out at a good rate, you refinance at a local bank using a cash out refinance loan, you get a check at closing, you repeat the process. I call it recycling money. You can use that same money over and over and over again. And so the first house you buy with this method pays for the second, which pays for the third, which pays for the fourth, and so on. So if you get like in a groove of this, where you're able to find, you're always looking for houses. You find one, you run the numbers on it, you determine that the numbers make sense, and you're still getting a good cash flow because the rent is high enough and the interest rate is there, and the purchase price, what you can buy it for versus what the after repair value is going to be, makes sense. If you can do this every 90 days, even if it's every 4 months, you really can buy a lot of houses quickly. Because if it takes you 4 months to renovate a house and find tenants and refinance it, then just think about it every year, how many houses you can buy that way. Oh, also, I should say to the people that are putting questions into the chat, make sure that you're doing the questions to everyone in the Zoom chat, not direct message, because those will disappear, and then I won't be able to respond to you. So make sure they're to everyone. And again, if I am going to make time at the end for questions, but if I don't get to your question, I will email you. So you might be thinking to yourself, well, Heidi, I love that idea of the BRRRR method, and I don't have cash for the first closing, or I'm going to get cash to do the first closing. You can't BRRRR something you don't have. Great question. Here are some ideas. First, consider like getting to that first BRRRR, your first domino. You've got to get enough money to get that first cash house with cash first. How do you do it? Live on a budget, save 20% of every paycheck until there's enough cash for the first house. It's not fun, and it's what you can do. You get a second job, and that second job just funds your financial freedom savings account. And when there's enough money in there, you buy the house with cash. Sell a car, be a one-car family. Sell a business. If you own a business or you own part of a business, sell part of that business or sell that whole business and use that to buy your house with cash. You have funds in a self-directed IRA, look into that. There's a lot of rules with that. So make sure you follow the rules, because those can be easy to mess up. That's another topic for another day. So it may take a while to get that first house that you do the BRRRR method on. And it's totally worth it, because that's that first domino that hits all the other dominoes that allows you just to keep recycling that cash and getting one house after the other. Just make sure, and this is the key to it all, is that you're buying that house at 70% of the after repair value, and you're not spending more than 10% on closing costs and repairs. I mean, preferably even less than that, obviously, so that when you go and do the cash out refinance, you get all of your money back. So you've got to get it pretty far underneath the after that what you think the appraised value is going to be, and then put, do the repairs, but not overspending on those repairs, so that when you get your money, when you do your cash out refi, even after the closing costs on the cash out refi, that there's enough money left over. So you're gonna have two sets of closing costs when you purchase it and closing costs when you refinance it. But when it works really well. I've done this several times and gotten my money back out and just used it again. So it doesn't work in every situation, and it can work in some situations. Now, there are 11 more ways to pay for rental properties in addition to the 9 that I just talked about, and we are running out of time. We only have 5 minutes left, so I'm stopping there. And I'm just gonna, I will get to the questions. I just wanna say a couple more things. One is where this fits into the whole 14-step plan. So the first part of your 14-step plan to financial freedom is creating your vision of what financial freedom looks like for you. And hopefully you watched my video on this from a couple weeks ago. The second part is learning to calculate expected profit on a property and set your criteria so that you easily say yes or no to something when you see a property, when you see that a property is available for purchase. Then you're going to know how to choose what real estate type is right for you, find rental properties that meet that criteria, work with tenants, and get them into some leases that are win-win for them and for you, and maintain your properties, track your key performance indicators to make sure your properties are all performing well, or see when you need to trade some out like I've done over the years. And once you have financial freedom, protect your properties and your cash through trusts, through LLCs, through the right insurance, through property managers. That's the final part where you just have hired everybody to do the work on them, and then you're financially free from having a job. So I go through all of these things in detail in my full length course, which if you want to, you can hold your phone up to the screen and put your camera app on the screen, and you'll be able to see details on the full length course if you really like what you heard today and you want to know more about it. Or you can type into your web browser fundyourbiglife.com, and it will also take you to that full length course. It's 8 hours of content and 100 pages of content, including all my checklists and my processes, and an amazing spreadsheet that I made on tracking your money. So it's absolutely worth the money. It's only $199 times 2. It's 2 payments of $199. And if you implement what you learn in it, you'll make a whole lot more than that. So the other thing you can do is ask me questions about potential deals when you're enrolled in this class as well. You can watch the classes live. You can watch them with your partner, with your team, your kid, your spouse, and you can make it your Wealth Building Wednesday. Watch it on Wednesdays together. And so that's my course, fundyourbiglife.com. And now I will answer questions. So someone says, where can I find the other 11 ways? It's in my course on fundyourbiglife.com. What is the percentage earned on the rental that would make you believe it's a good investment? So in this market that we're in right now, if I can make $300 a month after leveraging it and use getting a 30-year loan or a 20-year loan, and it still cash flows and that's my profit, that's worth it for me. Because in other markets, you can do a lot better, but in the market that we're in, with interest rates what they are and home prices what they are, I'm good. I like 300. There's some investors that I talk to, they say they want 500 a month, and some investors I talk to say they want 200 a month. One investor I know says that they just want it to break even because they want it for the appreciation and depreciation. So everybody's a little bit different on that, but that's mine. So someone said, this is amazing. Can we have access to the PowerPoint after the session? This will be on the YouTube channel, and it won't be too long before that is posted on the MAPS YouTube channel, and you can find that link here in the chat. Again, I will respond to all of you if I don't have time the next minute to get to your question. What's the best strategy for finding homes and good, honest contractors? Well, I can tell you about the finding homes part. If you will come to my next course, I go through how to find homes, and you can find the link to my next course on BuyRentalProperties.com. Mackenzie, my assistant, will put that in the chat. BuyRentalProperties.com is where you can get the link to the next course on where to buy rental properties, how to find them. What's the best? Oh, how to find good, honest contractors. Going to investor associations and talking to other investors in your area about their experience, and making sure that after you think you found the right contractor, that you've gotten references and asked people what the experience was like working with them. Someone says, does your model work for houses and townhomes and also apartments? Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I have a blend of houses and apartments. I sold my condo. I bought a condo in Costa Rica through seller financing, and it worked out really well, made great money on it, had a wonderful property manager there, and sold it for a profit and used it to buy 4 other properties. Let's see, someone says, do you have to hold and rent the property for a while before refinancing it, or can you do it quickly? It depends on the bank. That's why we've got to keep calling banks and asking them. One of the banks I work with, they have no rules about that. So I can buy it and turn around and refinance it immediately. And that is all the time we have for today. Thank you so much for being here. I hope I see you at our next session and I hope that you have massive success on your journey towards financial freedom. I'm Heidi Fore. I'm a MAPS coach. And I, again, thank you for being here today.